Good. So, good evening. I would love a wave or hello from somebody. Yep, it says that I'm live. Can't see it, but that's good. So, good evening, good evening. It's Leslie here from Wild Country Woman. Hello, Wild Country Woman. I am live here this evening with the wonderful Jane Morris, who I think it was a mutual friend connection said that we needed to connect. We needed to speak to each other. So we did a few weeks ago. And then we had such a brilliant conversation that I wanted to bring it to you guys as well, because I think that Alexander Technique, which is what Jane practices and teaches, is really, really valuable way of looking at how we move through life. And I don't know about you, but I'm definitely holding on to quite a lot of tension at the moment and have been. So the more that I can think about my posture and move well, the better. But Jane's got an interesting story of how she got into it and what it is that she does now. So I'm going to hand you over to Jane to introduce herself and let us know a little bit about what she does and who she helps and maybe even why she's doing it.
Okay.
Thank you for being
here.
It's
very lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I think sometimes it can be interesting to start with why you do it and then what it is. So I think I suffered with back and neck pain for many years. And I found that I really wanted to do more exercise. I wanted to move more, but every time I did it, I injured myself. And I tried many different things, many of which were really helpful, but it was very much the way that I did things that was the challenge. And when I discovered Alexander's Technique, it was just like a light bulb that this was actually going to help me to start to understand how I was doing things, and therefore a possibility after all of those years of pain and discomfort that something might be able to be different. And that's why I decided to train, because I was so excited, even from the first moment, that there was possibility of change, possibility to help myself, because I think when you're in pain for a long time, it can be quite disempowering. And I definitely found that. And I kind of almost gave my control over to other people, my power to kind of help me. And it's not that that's not wonderful, because it is wonderful when you need that help. But the idea that I might be able to do a little bit for myself was just great. So I discovered Alexander's Technique accidentally when a friend said to me, "Have you tried this?" And I said, I've never heard of it. What do I do? I'll definitely do it. And so I went along to see a teacher, and I had a lesson, which we'll come on to, the fact that it's teaching. And I was just fascinated straight away in what was this thing that she was talking about? How could I start to learn it? Even from the way she started to help me move slightly differently in that first lesson, that this is different, this feels different in me, it feels lighter, it feels easier, maybe things won't be so difficult all the time. And so then I trained, because you can train in Bristol, and there's a school, so I trained at the school there.
Brilliant.
So, do you want me to kind of talk a little bit about what I do then, or?
Yes, I would love you to let us know a little bit about what.
Okay, so mainly I work with people, women, but actually predominantly, who suffer with mostly back pain, but sometimes neck and shoulder pain as well. And a bit like me, they've maybe had that for a while and they've tried things, but the pain just lingers. They seem to quite move on from it and not have that pain anymore, and it might come and go. And what I help them to do through teaching them Alexander's Technique is to start to notice, how do they move? So, and how does that contribute to the pain? So maybe how they hold themselves. You said earlier about holding on to tension or moving in a certain way. So we do a little bit of learning about anatomy, but we call it body mapping. So like, where are things in us? So what I love about that is there's no wrong answer, because where you think it is where you think it is. So that's always great. And then we start to re-educate ourselves about where things actually might be. And then how does that change the way that we move? We learn to stop and to pause. And that can be challenging to start with. It can feel like it's kind of getting in the way, but actually I love to think of it as liberating, because what we're actually stopping is the old way to allow a new way to come, and for us to move in a different way. So we do need to learn how to let go of the old way and to thank it and say, it's great, you got me here. I'm really grateful, but maybe I'll try something new now. And
that's so interesting, isn't it? The idea of not, because often we can see change as a bit of a battle. A change is like, oh, I should be doing this. And I've been doing it wrong all of this time. Oh, here's another thing to beat myself over the head with. But actually the idea of going, oh, well, do you know what? This pain is because of this movement, and the way that I've been holding myself is because of this, and it's got me this far. How amazing is that? Thank you. And let's do it better. Or let's tweak that so we can move away from pain. I love the idea of being grateful and then allowing change. The idea of pausing and noticing. So noticing the patterns of thinking as well as moving that might be connected, because often it's a pattern of thought sometimes that can cause us stress and tension and make us kind of hide away or slump or whatever. So yeah, I love that idea.
And I think it's critical, because I think that, you know, that word should, what a challenging word, because, you know, and one of the first things you do in Alexander's technique is to start becoming aware. And so what I say to the people that I work with is, if you notice something 50 times, I want you to cheer and say, yeah, great, I've noticed it 50 times, not, oh, I've done it wrong 50 times. Yeah. Actually, unless we start to notice, we can't change. So we need to be our own cheerleader and telling ourselves how great we are for noticing. Yeah. And that then gives us the opportunity to change. So we're looking for choice. Yes. Because we may sometimes still deploy that same habit, because it may be the right habit for the situation. Yeah. But it's just given us those, you know, do I have options? Can I choose that before we find that we're already, I don't know about you, but my is often my shoulders are up here, and I'm holding that kind of tension. And so increasing choice and increasing that kind of, yes, this is brilliant, I've noticed. So now, what do I want to do?
Yes. Oh, I love that. And that actually there's that noticing is really powerful as well. I love that you notice it 50 times and you don't punish yourself for it, but allow it. And it feels very similar to the way in which I work when I work one-to-one with people as well, which is a lot of it is about changing about how you think about things, about finding a positive approach, noticing what you do and not beating yourself up for it, and finding the space and the scope for change. So in a positive way. So again, you can see anyone watching this is why Jane and I had such a great conversation. So so who do you generally work with? It's like, who comes to you? Is it because they've been around the houses with physios and osteos and all of that, or do they come straight to you because somebody's told them how wonderful Alexander technique is? They don't know what it is, but they're going to come in.
Well, it's interesting, it varies. So quite a lot of people come to me when they have tried many things, and often the things that they've tried, they've been extremely helpful to them. Yeah. But they haven't been able to make that change for themselves. So they've needed to kind of have treatments and other things repeatedly. So they might have been referred by an osteopath, or someone else has said to them, actually, this would be a great add-on. Because one of the things about Alexander's technique is it's really great to complement other things.
Yes.
And so it often is that complementary. And then there are occasionally people who either somebody said to them, you should try this, it's great, I think it might help you. And then the other group of people are people that perhaps they've done quite a lot of body work and they're curious because they've heard about it and think, I wonder what that is. I'm curious to learn more. Predominantly, the people I see are people who have suffered with back and neck pain for a long time. And that's largely because they've heard me speak as well about the fact that that's how I found it. And so we've got kind of, you know, that thing in common to start with. And many people come to the technique to various teachers because of the fact that they're suffering with back pain and neck pain.
And I know it's kind of frustrating. Physios and osteos are often giving you things to do after, you know, like exercises to do in between, and then it's very hard sometimes people to integrate that. but I can see how Alexander technique would complement it, because then it's not about doing a specific exercise, but about moving, about how you move regularly through it.
Yeah, and also maybe how, if you've been given some exercises to help with rehabilitation, actually a way to do them well, so that you get the result you're looking for from the thing. So it can be very complementary in that way.
Yeah. All right. Yes, I can see that, because you're kind of tuning into your body in a different way and noticing, as you say, and thanking and appreciating it. So here we are in a kind of like potentially emerging from lockdown. Oh my goodness. Potentially, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I'm still not feeling like, you know, everything's going to be bright and rosy in the summer. Let's just not count our chickens just yet. But everyone's been carrying a lot of tension and working in really weird positions and places. And I don't know, I find myself moving around constantly if I'm trying to do any computer work during the day. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some hints and tips that you could pass on posture-wise that would be sort of shareable in this way over a screen, but they might be helpful. So I wonder if you could share those with us. That would be
that would be great. So where I'd start with is kind of, it's the word posture to start with, because often when people think of a posture, they think that they have to hold something. There's the perfect version. There's that way that I must do this. It should be upright in this way, or I should be kind of holding myself. And so one of the things I always say is, actually, for me, posture is movement. And we're helping you to find the way that you can move and do whatever it is you want to do in a way that's comfortable. So you know, what will be the optimum way for me will be slightly different for someone else, because we're all made slightly differently.
Yes.
So one of the things before we go on to the tips is, you're looking for your version. So to someone like me, that's super exciting, because my first tip is to be curious about yourself, because you are completely amazing.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness, I love that. To be curious because you're completely amazing. Yes, that's my kind of tip.
And no one ever does it like you. So I want you to be asking yourself, how do I do this? So some of the things I thought to think about. So think about, if you're putting your coat on, how do you put your coat on? Do you always put the first arm in the same arm first? As she says, putting a coat on that doesn't exist. Do you, if you're lifting your coat, do you always reach with the same one? How do you come forward to do it? When you go upstairs, do you always go the same leg first? Do you do it with the other leg? What does it feel like to do it with the other leg? A lovely one that I like is if you have a nice arm cross. When you cross your arm, nice. I can really get into arm crossing personally. Yeah. But what would it be like to kind of undo that and then cross your arms the other way? It's not generally, not for everyone, but for most of us, it's not quite so nice.
No.
It feels funny and it feels odd. Yeah. So noticing how you do things, and then if you're doing them differently, what that might be like, and knowing that it's okay, that it might feel unusual. And then the other thing you said earlier about your thinking and how your thinking affects, and we're absolutely working with thinking in Alexander's technique. So what I would also pay attention to is, if you're doing something that you don't like, how do you do it? So for me, I don't like washing up. I don't know what it is about it, but I do not like it. So how do I come to washing up? Oh, I don't want to do it. I'm heavy. I'm kind of like doing it with gritted teeth, undue rest, because I know it needs to be done, but I don't want to do it. So really noticing what happens in myself. So for me, if I'm not thinking about it, that might be a kind of slumping, a kind of heaviness, a kind of, kind of gritting of the jaw. Then do something that you love. So the other thing, I kind of use the ones in the kitchen. I love to cook. So how do I generally come to cooking? Well, I'm usually a bit excited. I think I'm going to create something delicious because I like to eat as well. What do I notice? Well, I'm lighter. I'm generally a little bit more upright. I don't feel heavy. I'm I'm a bit more like in the moment, because I'm thinking about the fact that I'm chopping these veg and that's ready and I'm doing this, as opposed to, oh, it's another bowl. So just notice how that affects you.
Yeah.
Start to notice these different things, because what I say to people is generally we do most things in the same way, because our habits are very strong, and obviously they're really important that we don't need to be thinking about the minutiae of everything all the time, but we tend to stand, we tend to sit, we tend to walk, we tend to run, all in the same way. So the more we notice how that's affected by something we like or we don't like, and the more we pay attention, we'll start to see our patterns, and our patterns then of where do we hold tension, and then that curiosity can then lead on to then how we might change it.
That is so interesting. And I could think equally, like sometimes I love to cook, and sometimes cooking is a chore, and that kind of depends on timing and what I'm cooking and what I've done that day. And I was just thinking about when I love to cook, it almost feels like I'm dancing around the kitchen to get things and to, like, oh, what else can I put in here? And then I'm open. And then when it's something that I'm not wanting, when I've just had enough of cooking,
or you're in a rush,
I'm like,
oh, be done now.
Oh my god, oh. Yeah, and then the whole thing is just so much less pleasant. And I'm thinking about washing up equally is something that I don't enjoy, because it feels a little bit relentless, a bit like laundry. But I can allow washing up to be an enjoyable experience, because I've used it as a mindful technique at times, and particularly during the day, and I can look out into the garden and I can just enjoy, and just but then again in the evening, when you accidentally put it off for too long, and then you go back into the kitchen and you thought you were going to go to bed, and there's a stack of pans, and like, oh. And I can, as you were saying that, I could feel my posture. I could feel the slump and the lightness. It's really interesting. So just being curious about that might help you be aware of why it is.
Noticing how your thinking affects you. Yeah. Because we'll all be different. And I think it's really interesting that you say about cooking. It's the same when walk, isn't it? If it's a beautiful day, you're enjoying the place that you are. It's absolutely lovely. You might notice one set of the way that you might walk and enjoy it. But if you're, I don't know, in the days when we went to work and it was raining and we were late and we were rushing and people seemed to be in the way and all of those things, how different an experience it is, even though it's the same activity. And that's quite similar. Yeah,
absolutely. Or if you spent half an hour trying to persuade your children to get out the door for your daily walk in lockdown, and how much less enjoyable that is. Yeah, no, I love that. So the first tip is being curious and noticing your thinking.
And notice how you do things and how your thinking affects it.
Yeah, I love that. That's something I'm going to do that this week.
Cool
idea. Yeah.
So your next one. So I toyed with what to call this. So you can have two titles depending which works best for you. Okay. So the first one is "Where is my head?" Or if that doesn't quite work for you, then it can be "Let your head balance easily on top of your spine."
Okay.
So I like "Where is my head?" because it's easy for me to remember. And the reason in Alexander Technique, we work a lot with the head, neck, back relationship. And that's not surprising, because our heads are really heavy. Obviously, we are designed to balance and carry our heads, but our heads weigh about 5 kilos. So one of those big water containers.
Wow. Yeah.
5 litres is about 5 kilos, so about that size. So when perfectly balanced on top of our spine, we don't notice it, it's effortless. But for those of us, particularly who've been doing lots of computer work, and lots of Zooms, we might find that we're kind of coming forward on our head. So all of a sudden, not only is our head out of balance, but also that the relative weight of it becomes even more. So there's a graphic that I've seen that, it weighs 5 kilos here, but when you get right out here, it's the equivalent of like 60 kilos, I think, on this particular graphic, because with that many degrees, so obviously it still weighs 5 kilos, but the amount of work that we have to do is considerably more. So not surprising that many of us are getting neck ache because we're holding our heads, and because we're drawn to the screen, because, you know, we want to make sure people know that we're listening, we're drawn visually in. So one of the things that I do that's often an easy way to get people to shift that kind of balance and things is actually thinking about where our heads join our spines. So this is one of the things where it can't be wrong, because it's what you think as a person. So I'd ask a client, where do you think your head joins your neck? And so I often get a variety of places. The one for me was here. And obviously in my brain, when I thought about it, I could think, well, obviously it doesn't because there's neck. But absolutely, that's where I moved from. So all of my movement came from here. Also, quite a lot of people have it kind of about the right kind of height, but at the back. So that as if our head is hanging off the spine, kind of supported from the back. But where it actually is the little dents behind our ears are a really good place. If you could put your fingers right into the middle of your head there, that's where, more or less, where it joins. So there's a little bit more head at the front, particularly when you put the jaw on. So the head is designed to nod forward, but actually we move from here. So if you think about, so I brought my phone with me. You've got yours. So think about, in the sort of usual way you might look at your phone or a book. So how I would have done it before I did my training, I'd have been like this. I'd have been drawn not only down, but also my head would have come right forward. And obviously then I'm doing a lot of work. My muscles are having to work really hard to hold my head there, in the same way as if you had a Chevy shopping bag and you hold it closer to you, it's easier, or a small child, than it is to hold far away. But actually, if I can really think about the fact that my head joins my neck up here, I can allow it to balance easily, and I can allow a little nod, but also I can bring the phone up to me, rather than going down to the phone. Same with a cup of tea.
Well, you can really tell the difference there, can't you? Like, you connect in with that join here, right? Or just about, and just think about that. And that little nod, there's no effort, but that kind of a little bit. There's a little bit of a sag in the shoulders as well that comes forward. Like, you can actually feel the effort that's going on in the muscles in my neck and shoulders there. And
so really, you know, thinking about some of those things, the other things that are quite useful to practice with, so I call eating soup or peas with a fork high risk activities, because most of us want to be near. Exactly. So actually, how would we, and we'll come on to in a minute, how we might move forward, but it's quite hard because, you know, we don't want to spill the soup down ourselves, and equally we don't want the peas going everywhere. So more often than not, we find ourselves coming forward, and it's all about how we might come forward, which we'll come on to.
I like that. High risk activities. Well, that's got to be written down.
So then my third one, so I need to move back a bit now, so you can see, get myself in. So your third one is to sit on your sit bones. So, can you still see there? Let's see. So I think one of your previous speakers at least has found your sit bones, because when I was watching one of the
yes, Leanne, yes.
So you can find them by popping your hand underneath your bottom, and you'll be able to feel the sit bones, and they're the bottom of your pelvis. And in Alexander's technique, we want to consider our back and our torso to go right down to the bottom of those sit bones. So it's all the way from up here, from the head neck joint, right down there. And so we want to allow ourselves to sit on those sit bones. So we need to very gently rock, and we can feel them on the chair. And then we're going to allow that whole of our torso all the way from those sit bones to support us.
So there's a real sense of just being grounded then, isn't there? A real kind of connection. I mean, I talk about sit bones and posture a fair bit, but this is like, it's so basic but so important. And then just that visual of actually just finding them It's always good.
You can have a little wiggle to make sure you can feel them on a chair. So in this kind of thing, to get used to it, a fairly firm chair is useful.
Yeah.
Because that helps you to feel them, so that you can really know that they're there. And actually, you know, they're kind of rocker shaped, so you can very gently rock on them. And what you'll start to notice is if you go backwards, you're kind of coming off them and you're on one edge, or if you're too far forward, you're almost not on them.
Yeah.
So you'll start to notice then, as you're looking at the screen, if you're really drawn to the screen, let's say I was trying to...
Yeah, you're off them. Yeah.
I'm not on my sit bones anymore. So actually that allows me to kind of start to notice.
Yeah. And then again, there's more effort involved actually. Like when you feel quite part of why you feel quite grounded is that actually there's much less effort involved in just sitting upright from your sit bones and just allowing that head to sit on top of the spine. And as soon as I lean forward there, I can feel the effort, particularly in my lower back, holding me there. Yeah. That'll be interesting.
And so then the kind of one that goes with that, so I asked myself, are my shoulders being bossy? Mm-hmm. And by that, I kind of mean quite often we'll do more than we need to hold ourselves up. Almost like we feel we need to do something to kind of hold ourselves in that position. So our bottom might clench and our feet might not be quite on the floor, but our shoulders are coming up. And so to allow the torso to support us, we're just thinking about letting go. So I don't, thank you shoulders, but I don't need you to be bossy and be in charge. Because quite often we'll do something to sit up.
Yeah.
But actually, if we can sit on those sit bones, and obviously it takes practice and it takes time and a gentle, kind approach to ourselves.
Yeah.
We can have our head balanced. Actually, we're perfectly designed to support ourselves.
Oh, this is great. Like so often I can think of at the dinner table as a kid, and like you were told stop slumping. My mum always had wonderful posture. And so you would just naturally, everyone would go like that.
Absolutely.
So you're holding yourself, but actually what you needed was just that little, okay, there are my sit bones. Let my shoulders go. Notice where my head is. That's where I need to be. And that will help me digest. So, not
great. And so then my next one that goes with this, so it's bending at the right joints.
Yeah.
So many of us, so this is an interesting one to notice how you do. So for example, if I was now sitting at my desk, because I was not so far away, and I reached for a pen, how am I doing that? Am I bending at the waist? Or if you think about where the crease in your trousers are, that's where your hips are, often a bit lower than where people think they are.
Yeah.
Can you actually allow yourself to rock on those sit bones so the whole of your torso comes forward and then you can reach? So you're using the hip joint and the knees and the feet, because obviously you're bent at those as well in the chair, to allow you to move, rather than what some of us can do is come forward either from the waist or sometimes from this kind of upper back area.
Yeah.
Very much just allowing that movement to come forward from the hips. And that will make that movement a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. How interesting. Yes. So again, this comes back to that curiosity, comes back to noticing, doesn't it? Like just noticing, but through the lens of where am I bending at the right joints? Thinking about, like, I had a shopping delivery earlier and I was thinking, well, how was I, actually it was all a bit of a rush, and because I was cooking at the same time, and so how was I picking them up? And I'm just thinking about, it probably was, could quite easily have just tweaked something, just because I was not paying attention, because I was doing too many things and they were quite heavy, and I was like, oh, I just want to make this a quick trip and pick them all up. That kind of thing.
So hips, knees and ankles, that's what to think about.
Knees and
ankles. All three of them. Hips, knees and ankles.
Hips, knees, ankles.
And all three of them can bend, because what many of us do, we'll bend at the knees, or we'll bend at the hips, or we'll bend at the waist, but we might not bend at all hips, knees and ankles at the same time.
And ankles can often be, because if calves are often very tight, then we lose a bit of mobility, flexibility, don't we, in the ankle as well. do that a lot in a squat. So,
Cool. And then my last one. So my last one is called Take Care of Yourself.
I like that one.
Surprisingly. So remember that you are your most important instrument. You're the most important thing in a task. So if you can think about you being the most important thing when you're doing a task, or equally important to the task, that slightly shifts the emphasis and the way that you do things. And then take the time to stop and notice. And what I'd say is, ask yourself, can I do less?
That's
and tell yourself, I have time.
Can I do less, and can I
tell yourself, I have time? Because I think a lot of our habits come out very strongly when we're rushed.
Yeah.
Or we're feeling rushed. And many of us will use a lot more energy and a lot more tension than we need to.
Yeah.
To do activities.
Absolutely. And I can, like, so for example, I'm thinking of an example of my son has been doing some taekwondo lessons on Zoom and been really enjoying them, but he gets into a complete flat about 10 minutes before it's due to start, because he's convinced he's not going to be ready and he's going to be late, and then it's actually impossible to get him to get ready, you know, because there's and then everybody else then ends up flapping around him. But today, actually, I ended up being, he was out in the garden, and I ended up just calling him in. We'd set up the Zoom, so it was almost already going, and he just came straight in and did it, and there was no tension around it. But equally, his body then was going to be ready to learn and move, rather than this total fraughtness. So, and then equally, I guess, with my picking up the shopping while doing the cooking this evening, the multitasking that we so often do, which is never really multitasking. It's just doing one thing and then flipping to another and flipping to another and flipping to another. And you end up never quite engaging with whatever it is you're doing. Can I do less is quite a hard question for busy women to ask themselves.
I think it is, but if you think about it in that kind of moment, so in terms of can I do less, what I think I'm meaning is, like, so if I'm gritting my teeth and taking the bag up, can I not grit my teeth when I pick the bag up? Or can I not have my shoulder up in the air? So it's that kind of, can I do less in this moment? Physically to achieve the task.
Yeah.
Because I think also being as important as the task is also a difficult one. And taking care of ourselves, because many of us will do more than we really should, or we'll keep going until that moment. But actually, if we can gently start asking ourselves, even if we can make a small amount of difference, it'll end up being a lot in the end. But yeah, these things can be challenging, and that's why the gentle approach and being kind to ourselves and really looking at allowing. Because in Alexander's we're undoing a lot of, we're kind of undoing rather than doing, and so it takes time because we're undoing habits.
Yeah, and we're so stuck in doing mode. And I don't know about you, I found like that first lockdown that we had last year that was so different, where there was a lot, suddenly you couldn't do lots of things. There was a change in tempo of life that was really quite interesting, I thought, to explore. And actually it gave space. I found that it gave me space to think and to move differently and things like that. This time round, because it's the third time round in lockdown, and yes, hopefully there's an end in sight now, I have found it harder to do less, far harder to take time over things, to get back into being in a bit of a rush. Like one of the things, the first lockdown, there was more time for meals in the evening because there were no evening activities. So you could eat and cook and there was less rush. Whereas somehow that seems to be less so this time around.
Yeah, and I think what we're, in a sense, with that question of I have time, it's more of an internal question.
Yes.
So a kind of, because I think that if we tell ourselves rushed, actually, it's quite difficult. As you say, your son can't be ready. But actually, if we can very gently just say an internal kind of, I have time.
Yeah.
Even if that gives us the way to actually be more present with the task. I find myself, quite often I can do it quicker if I'm not rushing.
Yes.
And the way to help myself not rush is to say, it's okay, I have time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I've managed it already, rather than all of the rest of the things that go around that when I'm rushing.
I can absolutely see that the way that your brain will find solutions will be different, because you'll have a pattern, like we're talking about patterns, you'll have a pattern of what happens when you're in a rush. And you'll have but the pattern, you can change the pattern by not being in a rush. And actually when you've got a pattern, it's really easy for your brain to just follow that, follow the rush pattern. But actually, if you give it the space, it might find much more efficient ways of doing things and thinking about things. And with a far lower level of cortisol and adrenaline coursing around our bloodstream, it's actually going to be easier for us to be able to do that anyway. I love that. There's so many parallels I can see here with the work that I do, but also with just that overall well-being and reducing stress and talking to our parasympathetic nervous system. Because actually, when we're sitting comfortably, when we're sitting in that lovely grounded posture, like on your sit bones, it's that grounded feeling is about safety, isn't it? It helps you breathe better as well as everything else.
And then through the lessons, you'll learn the kind of, we have these, once we pause, we have instructions that we give to ourselves about lengthening and widening. And that's what you learn in the lessons. You come and you learn what, and you have to find your own version, because my words won't be the same words as someone else. And, we're kind of learning to let go of that tension. So we're lengthening and widening and allowing that support. And then that's what we start to bring into easier ways of movement, asking for freedom and other things.
So I see, so the lessons, you find your own version, you're learning to let go, you're learning to allow, and then you actually find easier ways of movement and easier ways.
Well, and learning to stop as well, because it's quite challenging.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, depending on how ingrained the habit is, or how important the thing is that we do. So we often work very indirectly. So I think of it a bit like if you've got a tablecloth on a table and it's beautifully smooth, and then you pull at one corner, actually affects obviously the whole tablecloth, not just that corner. So sometimes if you come, let's say you came to me to work with me for lessons, and you came because your shoulders, I've always got tension in my shoulders, you might be thinking, why is she getting me to work with my feet? But because we're working with the whole person, and actually wherever we hold tension and how we hold ourselves affects the whole of us.
Yeah.
We often work very indirectly.
Yeah. Through all of that fascia, through that kind of, our body is so connected. Like there's a real thing about, like, between the jaw and the pelvic floor, your tension in the jaw translates into tension in the pelvic floor, which I find fascinating because it doesn't feel like it's connected, and yet it is.
We've got all the diaphragm, so it's amazing.
And the diaphragm is just really, really powerful. We often hold so much tension there, psoas muscles, all kinds of places where we don't notice because it's translated up here, but it comes from how we move. This is brilliant. So how can people get hold of you, Jane? So
they can go to my website or my Facebook page, which is, they're both Freedom and Ease. So freedomandease.co.uk for the website. And if you search Freedom and Ease on Facebook, you'll find it there. And they can either ring me or drop me a message. I'm happy. They could, if they've got a particular question, they could always drop it in the bottom of here if they think it'd be relevant to other people. And I'm always happy to have a chat, because I think more often than not, people haven't come across the technique. It's quite useful to talk about how it might help, or what they've tried in the past, what they might be interested in it for. And so I'm really happy to have conversations with people with no obligation, to just kind of see how it might help them.
Well, thank you so much. I found this fascinating. I hope that others do. So the only problem I find with Zoom is that I can't always tell. Sarah, you did make it. So Sarah says, love the can I do less? I have time. Thank you.
Great.
So that one's already been helpful. But yes, so much wisdom and so like in those 5 tips. I'll write a little summary that will go above this in the Facebook group, just because it's really useful for people to be able to have a glance at that. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
No, it's been my pleasure. I've loved it.
Yeah,
thank you for inviting me.